I'm picking on Michelle outside. We just got her US last month, and I was wondering if she's in her car on her way here. We'll save her pin for you when she gets here. Did I at least get a smile on?
Tom, I'm just sitting in the car to make sure that there's no chance of feedback or stealing his bandwidth.
Okay, well, let's kick it off. We'll just have to wait till next month to get your pin, and I'll show you. I proved I brought it. You know it's here. Okay, welcome everybody. Go on here or not? Can I go on?
Probably not. Probably not. Go back.
Okay, welcome to the, it is April, right? April Speakers Bureau of 2023. We are so glad to have you here. We have a pretty great program planned for you. We have a person going for their qualified speaker status, just like we did last month. And we need to congratulate the person that went last month, Michelle Albright, who was. Right, let's give her a round of applause. So we have one more person to get busy sending out to speak in local organizations and clubs. So congratulations, Michelle. And I'm sure she'll be our contestant tonight, and she'll get a chance to make her first vote. So you guys all better be good to each other, since they are significant others to each other. We I wanted to mention before I forget, I haven't gotten the final word. We may have a special guest next month. Some people have known I was sworn to secrecy, so I won't make any announcements about that special guest next month, but that we may have a special guest next month. For those of you who have been around for a while, you may remember when Toastmasters District 12 had two clubs that met in Upland, for lack of a better term, halfway house. One was called Twisted Toastmasters. The other ones were for men, one was for women. Anyway, they're trying to get that started up. If you have any interest in working with the Gal Club and helping them to change the direction of their lives, please contact me, and I will try to get that ball rolling. Do that would be great. I did need to make a couple of announcements. I did that in my Speakers Bureau news, but for those people who don't read my news, anyway, we had a death. One of our qualified speakers died, Michael Owen. He was the area governor of the year, 1 year, and he was division governor. We'll miss his wonderful English accent and his good evaluation suggestions that he made when he was here. So, thought the prayers go out to him. Also, one of our qualified speakers, past district governor Jack Nelson's wife, Susan Nelson, passed away. So our thoughts and prayers go to both him and to their family and so on. So that's something I didn't mention in my Speakers Bureau news. So thank you to both of our speakers that I did not mention, other than the person going to their US, and that was David Flores talking about his wonderful, exciting I want to say hot potato, caught in the pickle, and the other one, of course, the unintended consequences speech by Michael Alexander. If you did not get to see that, as usual, thanks to our tech guy, you can go back and see those on YouTube. They're available quite a ways back. In fact, I was able to see something from like 10 or 11 years ago. So that was looking up something, and there 10 or 11 years ago.
Don't worry about it.
I noticed, congratulate a few of our speakers. I won't mention them all, but a few of our qualified speakers are on their area contests. So, but I will brag about my wife also. Could be going on to next levels. Anyway, we have about 4 or 5 of them were either winning tabletop or the evaluation contest. I think, if I'm not mistaken, someone will correct me. It's either next month's meeting, either May 3rd or May 4th. So whatever the first Wednesday is, that's always. And then we do have a full program already planned for June. But I do not have anybody going to their qualified speaker at this point. If they haven't yet, but for May we do not have anybody. I think we have 2 of them going, one in May. But you could have room for at least 1 in May. With that, I will pass the introduction to my co-chair who is here, who will be introducing our first speaker, Michael Osher. I'm going to take it away. Oh, I got to do one more thing. I got to talk about our prize for those people who brave the weather or the parking or the whatever to get here. As usual, we hand out tickets to drawing held at the end of the meeting, and it'll be first come, first served to come up here. And the 5 books that are available today, one of those, we have a little bit of a military theme tonight. So one of those is the super accredited speaker friend of District 12, Heart of a Military Woman by Cheryl Rausch. That's one of our prizes for today. The colossal collection of quotable quotes. We have Bill O'Reilly's Killing the Rising Sun. Tom Brokaw, The Greatest Generation. And one kind of addendum to that is Tom Brokaw, An Album of Memories, the bottom pictures and letters and so on. So those are some that someone might be interested in. We will have that drawing at the end. With that, I'll hand it over to Michael, co-chair of District 12 Speakers Bureau. Michael Ozier, past district governor, past international director. Michael.
Thank you, Tom. Jeremiah, can you mute your laptop? And Rob, can you mute the podium lectern laptop? Because we're hearing some whispering by Jeremiah's laptop. Maybe it's impossible.
Michael, go ahead.
All right, no problem. Greetings, District 12 Speakers Bureau. Tonight, our speaker is a member of Valley Toastmasters. Oh yeah, don't make me say what kind of club it is. He and his wife, Michelle, have a friendly competition. Michelle earned her DTM one day before our speaker, and last month she obtained her qualified speaker status. Tonight, Roger is presenting his qualified speaker speech. His talk is about a piece of writing from World War II, a single paragraph that was pivotal to the success of the Normandy landing. His speech, the paragraph that saved D-Day, Please join me in welcoming distinguished Toastmaster and Navy veteran, Roger Bowman.
Thank you, Michael. Fellow Toastmasters, have you ever been inspired by someone who says they can do great things? How often do they really do those things they aspire to? Tonight, I'm going to tell you of a person who said he could make a significant difference in the outcome of a very important event, and went on to make a far larger impact than even he had imagined. This story affects me on 2 dimensions. First, my father served on a battleship in World War II. His service inspired me to join the Navy, where my ship was among the first to enter the Persian Gulf after another Navy ship, the USS Stark, had been hit and almost sunk by 2 anti-ship missiles. Now, the system I oversaw on my ship was our ship's anti-missile defense, so I knew it fell to me to keep my shipmates safe. That deployment counted as a combat tour, but I recognized I was in no real danger, and I've always wondered how I'd perform if I was in real peril, as my father had been in. The anti-missile system was a computer-controlled robot, and the Navy spent 2 years teaching me the computer systems behind it. So after the Navy, Of course, I went to work for Silicon Valley and eventually started my own tech company using other people's money. It's hard to persuade other people to give you their money. And that's the second reason this story affects me. It centers around a very short, persuasive piece of writing, the kind that makes people do something they never thought they would do. When I first saw it, it was as if I was panning for gold. And there in my pan was a gorgeous gold nugget. I absorbed it. I absorbed its lessons, and I hope it can help you be more persuasive in your life. Let's begin. This is Europe just prior to World War II. Here you can see France, and above it, the island of Britain. And this is Europe 2 years later. In red are all the territories Germany had conquered. Spain is in white because it was a fascist country like Germany. No need to conquer it. So essentially, the entire continent was under German control. And by 1944, everyone knew that hundreds of thousands of American troops were arrayed in England, getting ready to cross the channel to invade Europe. We know it. The Germans know it. Now, the Germans believed we would jump across this very narrow channel at the Port of Calais, that pinch point you see on the map. That's because, well, troops are super vulnerable while they're in boats at sea, so they need to cross as quickly as possible. But we secretly decided to invade here at Normandy. Here was the plan. The Americans were set to land on two adjacent places. The first is Omaha Beach on the right. You already know about Omaha Beach from Saving Private Ryan, a brutal landing. The second is Utah Beach on the left. The 20,000 men of the 4th Infantry Division were assigned to land on Utah Beach. And the second in command of that division, the executive officer, or XO, wanted to go in with the first wave. He made that request of his boss, and he was totally turned down. No dice. And he understood why. He was a general. Generals plan. Subordinates execute. You don't send generals in on first waves. They tend to draw a lot of fire their direction. And this forces other people to have to spend extra time protecting them. They're just too juicy of a target. And because of that, well, they usually wind up dead, which is really inconvenient when it comes time to make new plans. And it's also super inconvenient if you're the general. Also, there's the issue of this particular general. What do I mean? Here's our common conception of a leader. This is Theodore Roosevelt, the Rough Rider, who would later become president and carry a big stick. And this is General Patton, old blood and guts, standing tall next to one of his subordinates. That subordinate is the subject of this story. That is one-star General Teddy Roosevelt Jr., the son of President Theodore Roosevelt. Unlike most other generals, Teddy didn't spend his career in the Army. He went to Harvard. He was a businessman. But he had served in World War I, and he was ready to do his duty in the Second World War. So he asked his boss a second time, please, let me go in with the first wave on D-Day. Again, his boss said no. Not only no, heck no. Now, this didn't surprise him. Ted knew that if there were any general that was to be sent in, it would be anyone but Ted. Why, you ask? Ted was totally aged out. He was in his upper 50s, and he had already suffered 2 heart attacks. Furthermore, he had been wounded in World War I and needed a cane to walk. This was not someone whom anyone in their right mind would send into a beach full of mortars and machine gun bullets. He couldn't run. But Ted was a very smart guy. he sat down and wrote a single paragraph outlining his rationale for allowing him to go. 6 sentences. He made a separate, incontestable point in each sentence. And that's what blew me away. The succinct way that he said so much in so few words, combined with the indisputable truths that he outlined. It jumped out at me. I saw it as World War II's Gettysburg Address. Let's take a look at it. This is the structure he used. Each sentence would convey a point that both he and his boss knew to be true. He would outline the risk to the mission, problem facing his team, a problem facing his boss personally, why he could solve those problems, and lastly, as any good salesperson would do, he added a bonus reason. Let's take a look. Here's the first sentence. The force and skill with which the first elements hit the beach and proceed may determine the ultimate success of the operation. Yep, there could be no hesitation in these troops. They had to face the enemy fire and get to their objectives, or the entire invasion could fall like dominoes. The second sentence. With troops engaged for the first time, the behavior pattern of all is apt to be set by those first engagements. Most people don't realize that although 16 million Americans would fight in the Second World War, D-Day was the first contact with the enemy for almost all the Americans in Europe. The beaches were very well defended, and if a panic ensued, all could be lost. Next, he said, considered accurate information of the existing situation should be available for each succeeding element as it lands. Exactly. War is chaos. Battles are confusing. Only the coolest heads can see the real picture. And having already fought in World War I, Teddy knew he could keep his cool. You should have, when you get to shore, an overall picture in which you can place confidence. Yep, green troops often lose their head and exaggerate the force in front of them. I can't blame them with explosions all around them. But the boss needs an accurate assessment. That's his fundamental challenge, one rarely solved. I believe I can contribute materially on all of the above by going in with the assault companies. Ted believed it. He knew it was absolutely true. And his boss knew Ted was right. And he added this bonus reason. Furthermore, I personally know both officers and men of these advanced units and believe that it will steady them to know that I am with them. If you have ever served in the military or even watched a war film, you know that the top boss, the CO, is all about the objective. The second in command, the XO, well, is all about the men. The XO ensures the men get trained. The XO ensures the men get equipped. And that was Ted's role in the division. He had had a lot of contact with those men. Another undeniable rationale. And it worked amazingly, stunningly. The CO granted permission for Ted to go in with the men, cane, heart problems, and age notwithstanding. The CO said he didn't expect Ted to survive the day. And frankly, neither did Ted. He wrote this in a letter to his wife. We've had a grand life, and I hope there'll be more. Should a chance that there's not, at least we can say that in our years together, we've packed in enough for 10 ordinary lives. He had been married to Elizabeth for 31 years. D-Day arrives, and the troops disembark under fire. They make it across an open beach to the safety of a seawall, but then it hits them. Uh-oh. They've landed 1.5 miles from their designated spot. Ted knew this was really not good. There had been a storm the day before that delayed the invasion by a day, And on this day, June 6th, there were very high waves and strong winds, and it had blown their boats off course. And that was a big deal. Let me explain. The 4th Division was made up of a lot of smaller units, each with specific assigned objectives. And these objectives coordinate with one another, and they have to be achieved quickly, many in the first hour, many more by the end of the first day. 1.5 miles is a huge distance when you're fighting for yards. They were not going to achieve any of their objectives. They were simply too far away. Not only that, the follow-on waves of fresh troops will land where they're supposed to, and none of the enemy defenses will have been neutralized. Furthermore, the force will be divided, each half strength and far easier to defeat. It was a real disaster unfolding in real time. And Ted was the senior man on the beach. Everything fell to him. His staff advised him, just re-embark on the boats. Let's go the 1.5 miles, land at the proper spot. But Ted knew the element of surprise was long gone. And those same strong waves and wind that blew him off course originally would make it really super hard to make any headway at sea. It would just simply take too long. But Ted had a huge advantage. You see, unlike the subordinate unit commanders, who were supposed to be the senior people, who knew their own objectives and perhaps those of some of their peers, Ted, as a general, knew the entire picture of the assault. He decided right there to throw out all the invasion planning of the past several months and make new plans there on the beach. And he conveyed his decision in 6 famous words. We'll start the war from here. We'll start the war from here. He ordered all successive landing forces to likewise miss their landing zones by the same 1.5 miles and land where he was. Ted created new objectives for every unit in the 4th Division. But Ted had one more problem to solve. All of those troops in the forthcoming landing crafts would run onto the beach and not know where to go. So despite his physical limitations, Ted took it upon himself to personally lead each element. I'll quote from his Medal of Honor citation. Although the enemy had the beach under constant direct fire, Brigadier General Roosevelt moved from one locality to another, rallying men behind him. He directed and personally led them against the enemy. His valor, courage, and presence at the very front of the attack, and his complete unconcern for being under heavy fire, inspired the troops to heights of enthusiasm and self-sacrifice. He thus contributed substantially to the successful establishment of the beachhead in France.
Bravo.
Had Ted not been there, had Ted not written that amazingly persuasive paragraph, then the troops on Utah Beach may have floundered. And given the difficulties the American forces faced on Omaha Beach, had Utah Beach not been a success, the American forces may have been tied down indefinitely or even repulsed. Ted was awarded his Medal of Honor 3 months after D-Day. He received it posthumously. He became one of only 473 to receive the award out of the 16 million Americans who served. But Ted didn't die that day on the beach. He lived through that day and for another month. He died of his 3rd heart attack asleep after having spent the day with his son, Captain Roosevelt, who had also landed in Normandy. After the war, Omar Bradley, the general in charge of all American troops in Europe, was asked, "What was the bravest thing you ever saw in the war?" And without hesitation, he responded, "Ted Roosevelt, Utah Beach." Ted did exactly what he said he would do when he wrote that paragraph. Not a single word was about any benefit to himself. When an even greater challenge to his achieving his mission arose, he didn't falter. He understood his mission wasn't to land on the right beach. His mission was to defeat the enemy. Let's bring it home. Why does any of this matter to you? Have you ever tried to get permission to do a difficult task and you knew you were the right person to do it and were denied? Ted was 2 times, but he didn't let his prior denials stand in his way. He articulated points that his boss couldn't dispute that led to his being granted that permission. You can do the same. Have you ever faced a situation where you landed on the wrong beach and couldn't find your way, and you were tempted to backtrack? I've learned that my mission is to complete my mission, whatever the obstacles. I also learned that you have to start your mission from where you are, whether you're on the right beach or not. I would offer to you, follow the example of Teddy Roosevelt. Don't let anyone deny you your mission, even if they have good reasons to deny you. Stand your ground. Be persuasive. And when obstacles occur, as they inevitably will, rethink, re-strategize. Be decisive. Take a moment and think about your own mission. If you want to know how to accomplish it, if you'll permit me to paraphrase Teddy, start your mission from here. Mr. Speaker Bureau Co-Chair.
Bravo. Amen. Bravo.
Thank you, Roger. Oh my. I got chills, all kinds of chills.
God bless.
It is tradition of Speakers Bureau to give a few comments, first from the QSs and then from the rest of the group. I'm looking online first because I can see you guys better. Dominique.
Thank you, Michael.
Then we'll go to Michelle.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, and especially Roger. Roger, that was a wonderfully moving speech. And I especially loved your eye contact. I felt like you were talking only to me. Your eyes were drilling right into me, and that is not easy to do. Your technology was flawless, which is so rare in any kind of online or Zoom presentation. It shows a lot of preparation and practice. When you said heck no, I wondered if that was a direct quote or if you were just trying to keep it PG, because this kind of a speech really requires a hell no. This is war. We're grown-ups. I would encourage you, should you do this speech again, to bring it out. It's just hell. Hell is,
yeah.
Hell is in the Bible. Yeah, and war is hell. Thank you, Brian. Also, I believe there was a missed opportunity when he suffered not 1, but 2 heart attacks. A little more drama there.
Mm-hmm.
I love the structure. You had the truth, the risk, the team problem, the boss problem, I'm the fix, and the bonus reason. Then you had each sentence, but I would have loved to see in all caps at the top of each sentence, truth, then the sentence, risk, then the sentence. So I could follow the structure you beautifully laid out with, okay, this is the truth, and I'm the fix, and here it is. So I could more cleanly follow, because it was so gorgeous and such a fantastic structure. But then I started to think, wait, is this the I'm the fix, or this is the bonus reason? And I want that clarity. It's so easy, just a copy paste is done. You got emotional when you talked about Ted's bravery. I could see it, I could hear it, but you forced yourself through it. Please don't. Slow it down. Let us hear.
I have it now.
Voice crack. Let us feel it with you. This is, this was almost a eulogy. And I wanted to feel it. I felt the tears stinging the back of my eyes. But when you forced your way through it, the tears retreated. Please, next time, slow it down and let us get choked up with you.
The letter to his wife gets me.
What we feel is what you hold back.
Yeah.
And that's all I got.
Thank you, Dominique. Wow. All right, Michelle. Well, you're in a tough situation.
I'm in the car.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a crazy contraption holding my phone up, so I can't lower my hand. Dom, that was dynamite. Great feedback. Mine is going to be a little bit more personal because I have seen this speech from start to finish. I have heard it countless times. It has not gotten me emotional since the first time I heard it, but it got me tonight. And that tells you something, that he added more. He added more. He added beautiful imagery. He hit the structure that he wanted. I don't think he forgot a single thing that he told me he wanted to include. And so from that point of view, seeing it develop and then seeing it executed is pretty amazing. There was one section where I felt maybe after the emotion that Roger, you withdrew completely, maybe to control your emotions, and you turned off a lot of your vocal variety. And people do that when something is painful. They kind of put on a flat face and turn off their voice is too tight, just to be careful of that. Or like Dom said, let the emotion settle, and we'll be over here crying, waiting for that to happen, and then start up again when you can fully engage.
Good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. From the online Zoomers, any other comments from the QSs? Oh, David, Coach Flores.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Roger, really enjoyed your presentation. It's excellently done. Your vocal pace was easy and fun to listen to. I could tell that the emotions were there. It was greatly done. And everybody's already much covered a lot of things that they thought could help out with the presentation down the road. One of the things I think I would like to have heard more, though, is about Teddy himself. And, mentioned he was in World War I. He was the son of Roosevelt and stuff. But maybe a little more background on the tenaciousness that he had and how he got to be so tenacious. I mean, that's a character that is in a lot of those generations that existed then. There was a sense of just reckless abandon in which they would do things in life, no matter what is in the military or personal life, that they had this mentality that they just would be fighters no matter what. Something I feel like a lot of generations have lost over the years. I've been coached for years, and I've seen a change in how attitudes and behaviors are. And nowadays, it seems like there's not a real tenacious behavior among kids or anybody in that sense, where they're really they're more concerned about themselves than they are about others. So I think if you can maybe give me a little more insight to his tenacious behavior, maybe more things that he might have done in his younger days, showed that kind of behavior as a sense, rabble rousing or whatever it was that these guys do, because we know in the personal life, they can get out of control, in things that they do in everyday life. And maybe some background stories about what kind of a personality you really had going into this prior to being in this situation. Overall, fantastic presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, David. Good feedback.
Thank you, David. Kimberly, we want to hear from you.
Good evening, all. Please forgive me. I'm off camera. I'm outside running, which I'll tell you, I didn't get to look at you, David. Roger. But what I did get to do is hear you. And there were times in your speech when I stopped, pulled out my phone to look at your face to get the emotion. And I will tell you, you absolutely nailed this presentation. I want to personally thank you for putting this together, the structure, the format. It was amazing. And as a military veteran myself, heartfelt, there were a couple opportunities, and I think many people spoke to them already. I just want to throw maybe one or two in. Listening to it as if you were a podcast, I'll say. There were some vocal variety opportunities, I thought, there, and I've heard that already. So, I heard great presentation throughout, but I would have loved to hear some ups and downs, some roller coasters, especially since I was just listening. And then at the end, I thought about, wow, this guy was super brave. And you brought it back and you told people, don't let anything stop you. If you feel like you have a mission, you move forward on that mission. I would have just made a few more analogies to how he was, for lack of a better word, crippled or handicapped. He didn't let that stop him. He was this and that didn't stop him. He was this, that didn't stop him. And just bringing those points back home to remind us on the other side that we too can press through and be a leader, because leadership is about sacrifice, it's about service. And he showed us that. And let me tell you, you did a great job of orating that for us tonight. So thank you, job well done. I look forward to seeing you in the future.
As do I.
Any other comments from the QSs on Zoom? All right. Tom, I can't see the auditorium. Are there people there that have comments? And someone needs to unmute the lectern there.
Hello? Okay.
We're good.
I will call on it. That would like to make a comment, but I make my comment real quick, and that is, I know I'm supposed to talk about your speaking style and make suggestions, but I just wanted to know whether he ever talked to his wife again. And that would have added an extra emotional moment. My guess is probably not. So I love the comment about letting yourself feel the emotion. I think that's so important. I used to say that the perfect speech is one in which you almost break into tears, but not. So we still can understand your words. So you have enough passion for this story that was turned there. Do we have any comments from our, as they used to say in the old days, the peanut gallery? But said Clarabelle, how do you do the peanut gallery? Comment. Suzanne? No, Jeremiah?
Sure, I'll have it.
Go up there.
Roger,
Go up there.
can you hear me okay? Or-
No, go
I
up.
can hear you.
Okay, so Roger, I appreciate it. I love the story. I love the technology portion that you used, and you connected everything along. I would love to have seen this in person. I think as well, I think that added a lot to it as well, and really be able to have something to be able to help support that in the background. I think that would also help me connect. I think I lose a little bit whenever you're live, seeing something online. So that's where I felt like I could feel the emotion as I'm listening to your story. I'm just kind of putting myself in that situation, especially writing that letter to his wife. I thought that was a very powerful and emotional portion of your speech. But I thought overall you did fantastic. I appreciate all of the hard work. There's a lot of hard work that really was put into that. But once again, I just think I would love to see this live, just really kind of really feed off of that emotion. That's one thing I thought I was missing, but I can hear it in your voice. I do appreciate the authenticity of that. So great job.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
We have another person in the audience that I'm going to call on, even though he didn't raise his hand, because he's a, can I say old face or familiar face? Past Mr. Governor, past Speakers Bureau Chair, Ken Peterson. Do you have any suggestions? He's such a silent type.
Come on,
So,
Ken, I would
sir.
love to hear your voice. I miss you.
You should go back, by the way, I'll say this before he
Ken.
says anything. You need to go back to December the 7th. He did a
Kent is here.
hell of a job. Thank you.
Love you,
I
Kent
can say hell of a
Peterson.
job. Hell of a job doing our December 7th, about 8 or 9 years ago. So go back and see it on YouTube still. Ken, go ahead.
I have to put a qualifier on this, Tom. I think the way that the rules in Speakers Bureau read that a person must be in Toastmasters to do this.
Can you get closer to the speaker so I can hear you? Sorry, my dear. Can't.
I can't.
Go up front. Thank you, my friends. Thank you, Kent. Your words are very important to me. I want to hear what you have to say, Kent. Thank you, my dear.
Rod. The topic you have is something that's dear to my heart, the military. As you served and I served, it means something. And I have to tell you that that topic that you had is the one that I was not familiar with. Something I'm going to have to read up on. And when you said Teddy Roosevelt, I said, okay, he's got the wrong name as he started out his presentation. And I said, okay, Kim, listen up on what he's talking about. I think what you did is you got a topic that was unique in that many people have not heard about this. I hadn't heard about it, and I call myself a history buff. And it's something that I really took a lot of interest in. I was listening very carefully to the way you presented it. I liked what I would call the laid back manner. You have sometimes where people get out and really punch the lines that they have. And I don't think it has quite the same emphasis that you put on with your laid back manner that you have. And I think all the people that gave their little information before about how you did your speech, I agree with each and every one of them on the things that they brought up. And I too would like to see you do that in front of people, maybe in a military armed forces day type presentation or Pearl Harbor type presentation, and get people to know the topics of the heroes that we have out there. And the thing that I would also suggest is that as they mentioned, I would put a little more emphasis on the things that made him the hero, really, that he was. So giving a little emphasis on his background would definitely bring that around. And you did an excellent job, and I really appreciated the topic and the way you presented. Thank you very much.
It's awesome to see you, Kent.
Ken. I'm in trouble with Ken, but it's worth it. And those of you who are qualified speakers, the ones in the audience have these forms that if you're submit those so that we can get our votes. We need to get the votes in to let them know. And if you're at home, or if you're voting at home, make sure you send the word in through, I guess it's through chat with Rob. We'll take care of that. And we'll put that together. And as always, we will let them know within 24 hours as to the results.
Tom, we have a few more comments on the Zoom side.
Sure.
So Esther, I just raised my hand so we would see it. Esther had a few words.
Well, I'll start by reviewing Kent first. Kent, Roger could not see you. You had to look up. Good to see you. Well, Roger, wow. For someone who was not born in this country, you really made this interesting. I got a history lesson. I enjoyed how you really presented it and the style. Every time you said, let's begin, you got me ready. And I was waiting to hear what's next. At the very beginning, you got me at gold. As soon as you started mentioning those words, you know, I'm the gold. I was ready to listen to you. And your tone of voice, man, it's really Roger that. It's powerful, pleasant to listen to. I definitely enjoyed it. I won't repeat what the others have said, and I agree with everything that Dom said. There was a lot there, and thank you for the lesson.
Esther, thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Any other comments from the group here
Yes,
on the
I
Zoom
do.
world?
Yes, I
Oh,
do.
Lois, of course.
Yeah, sure. Oh my gosh. Please be a guest speaker at my clubs, my home club, the Clean Air Warriors in Riverside. You are awesome. You know, I've known you as a friend. This is a totally different side of you. God bless you. Always. Please, I would love to have you as a keynote speaker at my home club, Clean Air Warriors in Riverside.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you. Virtual hugs.
And going out of order, Val, a few words from you, Val.
I'm almost speechless. I was close to tears as you were telling that story. And it was so powerful all the way through where it built and it built and it built. I wish I could say something that would really make you change something, but in honesty, I was so impressed. I almost hate to follow you tonight.
I've heard you. You're awesome.
Well, I'm just really so grateful that I'm here tonight and heard that story, because I will carry it with me and share it with people because you shared it with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Val.
Well, Tom, I think that concludes the Zoom people. We're going to send it back to you at the VA.
Okay, that sounds good. We've got some more program to get to, and we're gonna do that. I think though, I hope I'm not mistaken, I heard your speech before, and someone brought up that that Teddy Roosevelt Jr. received the award that you mentioned, that his father also got, and maybe the only father-son group to get the congressional medal. Was that true?
There's actually a second. General MacArthur's father, Arthur MacArthur, also father-sonned it, but that's the only two.
Well, both familiar names to us, even who aren't historians. With that, I will then send the meeting over to another past District 12 Speakers Bureau Chair and qualified speaker, Connie, for the next introduction, for sharing these introductions tonight. Connie, come on up.
Thank you. Since 1994, Val Burgess has recorded nearly 200 oral histories of World War II prisoners of war. It was and is her commitment that these veterans' stories are kept alive and heard across the globe and by audiences of all ages. This work began when her uncle Vernon Burda spoke of wanting to return to his POW camp, prisoner of war, Stalag Luft 3, the great escape camp of World War II fame, in honor of the 50th anniversary of their liberation from another camp, Stalag 7A. In order to take a large group, Burda needed someone to market the trip. Val volunteered selfishly, wanting only the free trip to Europe. That journey experience changed her life. For the last 28 years, she has recorded their oral histories because we must hear what our soldiers endured. Today, her Wars Voices archive holds a vast collection of stories and research of a vast number of prisoners from both theaters of war. This evening, we get to hear one of those stories. Please join me in welcoming Val Burgess as she shares, failure was not an option. Val?
Have you ever felt like there was something so important and you knew failure was not an option? Perhaps when you were in the military, or an illness, or something in your life that seemed so incredibly important that you knew you had to win. You couldn't allow failure to stop you. We must know the stories of war. We need to share those stories with people of all ages because it matters. You matter. They matter. And what you can learn from them, those stories, is simply incredible. My life has changed because I knew these men, and I will forever be grateful. Tonight, I'm going to introduce you to William Billy Lamar Grafton. He was about this tall, but he was a mighty soul. he fully understood in his life, well, maybe he didn't use those terms, but he knew that failure was not an option for him. He was born on November 11th, 1924. He had 4 other older brothers, and along came another sibling after him. But one of his brothers wanted his mother to name Bill Armistice. You know, the brothers were really going for it, but Mama, she didn't take the bait. She called him Bill instead. Prior to the Great Depression, Surrey Grafton decided to buy a 16-acre farm. After all, his boys were really city boys. And he thought living on a farm would really make a difference in their life. Plus, he really wasn't sure about what the economy was going to do. They moved to Enterprise, Mississippi. The boys took charge of the farm, but their father's tutelage was also a part of their success. They had a huge garden, orchards, they had nut trees, pecan trees. And everyone they knew, they ate, their friends ate. Anyone who needed food came by and they were fed. Even those who rode the rails knew that it was what they would consider sort of an easy mark, but in fact, they were just good people that wanted others to eat. They raised ducks, chickens, turkeys, pigs, and beef cattle. So they had milk, they had eggs, they had meat. You know, they were dirt poor, but in actuality, they had food to eat, which meant they were really rich in many, many ways. Bill's father died shortly after the 8 years that they lived on the farm. They had to move away because he couldn't raise the final $500 to pay off the farm. And so it was given back to the former owner. Bill, his mom, his younger brother, they moved into a boarding house in another town to be near his older brother. There he went to school. But not only did he go to school, he got up in the morning before school and he worked at the Calhoun store. He worked at lunchtime and he worked in the evenings till 10 o'clock. He did it Monday through Friday and also on Sunday, the full day, and earned $12 a week. It helped his mom and his brother. It helped sustain them at the boarding house. Bill was in the 10th grade. He was a straight A student. Pearl Harbor hadn't occurred. His 4 older brothers decided to join the military. The oldest went into the Navy, the other 3, the Army Air Corps. And Bill continued going to school. On December 7th, 1941, well, all of you, I'm sure, know what happened. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. We were at war with not only Germany, but Japan. And the government needed to fill those people to fight the war effort. Bill knew he would be drafted because the draft was on. And he also knew that when he turned 18, they'd draft him, they'd select the service that they wanted him to participate in. And he would probably end up on the front lines. That was not to be. A week before his 18th birthday, Bill Grafton went and signed up, quit school, and joined the Army Air Corps. You know, because he didn't have a diploma. He was unable to apply for or take the test to be a pilot. For him, he became a sergeant, an engineer, and a top turret gunner on a B-24. That plane really bothered him because, you know, he knew that if the wing was hit, those gas tanks in that wing would catch fire. But the B-24 also always smelled of gasoline. There was that smell. So not only would the wing catch fire, but the entire plane would go up because of those fumes. They called it the flying coffin. Bill and his crew, the Applegate crew, and 47 other crews were stationed to go to the Philippines and fight the Imperial Japanese forces. They were going by transport, and they were down around Algeria when they let them off the ship. All of them, the 48 crews and all of their support staff. Their orders had been lost. They didn't know what they were going to do, so they left them there. No one even knew where they were for months. They were bored, they were tired, they just wanted to move on somewhere and be in the war effort. However, because they were sergeants and officers, none of them could help. They couldn't work in the kitchen, they couldn't do KP duty, they couldn't do a lot of things. Until one day, the 15th Air Force found out about them. They were stationed in Italy, and they had had major losses of aircraft and men. When they decided to go for it, they went to the top brass, those commanding generals, and they said, we know these men, although they fly B-24s, they'll do fine. They can catch on and they'll be able to fly B-17s quite well. They believed it and brought them over to Europe. They gave them manuals the first day there and gave them 2 days to study so that they could be in combat within a week. Lucky for Bill, he was smart, he was easy, education was easy for him. And he found he loved the B-17. He felt it was much, much safer. Bill and his crew, the Applegate crew, started flying. At that time in Europe, the crews were determined to complete 50 missions. Unfortunately for Bill and his crew, they were on their 18th mission over Geier. Anyway, they were going to bomb an airdrome, an airfield. They were in Hungary. And as they're flying over the airfield, they complete the mission, and the Messerschmitt 109s came after them. They lobbed rockets. One went right through their wing. They had a fire they couldn't put out. It was lucky that they could even stabilize the aircraft. The pilot got a hold of his men over the intercom and said, it's time to bail out. 7 of them went out. They could see the parachutes moving to the ground. Left was the pilot, Applegate, Finn, the co-pilot, and Bill on the flight deck. Flynn and Applegate were fighting over who was going to be the last to leave the aircraft. Bill was clipping on his parachute, as was Applegate and Finn. Bill went out the bomb bay. Applegate went out the window near the pilot's seat. They don't know what happened to Finn. As they were going down, Bill and Applegate could see each other. They tried to look back to see where he was, but they didn't see anything. And then all of a sudden there was this big explosion, a fireball, and that was it. When they got to the ground, they were free for 4 days. So they got a little comfortable and they went to Lake Balaton to get some water in broad daylight and were captured by the Home Guard. The Hungarians were treating them very poorly because they didn't know who they were. They didn't know what branch of service or what country they were from. They brought the Germans in who took the men And they then learned they were Americans. They fed them food and wine and hugged them and thanked them. And probably if they had figured out, or they could have communicated, they may have never been captured. They may have helped them get home. They stayed in a prison for a couple of weeks. They were interrogated, you know, the old stuff. And finally, there were a lot of pilots and 100 sergeants that were put on trains to go west to Sagen, Germany. It's now Sagen, Poland, to a prison camp called Stalag Luft 3. It was the prison camp, the Ritz of prison camps, and it truly was a location of the Great Escape. There were 10,000 men in prison camp. They were in 5 compounds, Commonwealth officers and American officers. It was toward the end of the war in 44, after July. And the German guards said to these 100 sergeants, you know, we can take you 7 to 8 days to your prison camp north by the Baltic. What do you want to do? And they opted to stay at Stalag Luft 3. They became orderlies, cooks, all kinds of things, but it was fairly safe for them. And then in January of 1945, January 27th to be exact, Hitler didn't want those Americans or the Allied, well, any of the Allied air crews to go back into the war effort because the Russian onslaught, they could feel the percussion of the infantry. They knew it was close, and they forced marched those men on January 27th at 11 o'clock at night. 2,000 men marched out. The next morning, another 2,000, until 10,000 men were on the road west. It was the coldest winter on record. It was painful for them. They had poor clothing, bad shoes. They had food they were carrying with them. They carried everything with them, and they were dropping it along the road. Some just laid down and died. For days they walked. Sometimes they got to sleep in barns where they got fleas and lice. And then one day they got to sleep inside of a brick factory where they turned the kilns up and almost burnt the place down, but they were warm. They were finally taken to a town called Spremberg, where they received from the Germans barley soup. It was hot. It was nutritious. It was like food of the gods. And many of them were so grateful for it because they felt so good about it. The Germans very quickly started moving these POWs all kinds of places. They spent huge train loads down south to Moosburg, which was outside northeast of Munich. And then they sent another group to a prison camp called Stalag 13D. It was outside of Nuremberg, and they were bombed night by the British, all day long by the Americans. They were by the rally grounds, and so that was always a target. They could hear the bombs coming down and would count 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. And when that bomb landed, they could tell approximately how close it was. It was a hellhole. It was a mess. They really needed to get out of there. And thank God, in April of 1945, they were forced marched south so that they could be in Moosburg and at Stalag 7A. It was a good trip for them. It was 92 miles they walked. They were strafed sometimes by Allied fighters, but they just jumped in the, in the ditches, and they were lucky. And then soon those same fighters knew they were POWs, so they just wiggled their wings, and it felt like they were almost going home. They bartered with the Germans with their D-bars, their chocolate bars, their leftover cigarettes, and their soap. It was a good deal for them. And just being outside of barbed wire felt amazing. Bill Grafton was one of those, obviously. He was, when Patton came in, his Third Army liberated these men. And when he came in, Bill was standing behind him as he stood up in his Jeep. And there's his little face right over here behind him. They took these men by C-47s to Camp Lucky Strike, where they were stripped of their clothing to put it in the fire because they hadn't bathed since January. They then fed them, they deloused them, and they put thousands upon thousands of POWs and injured soldiers on transport ships to take them home to the United States. The war was over with. It was actually the largest ferrying of troops across the ocean. Bill went home. You know, they put all those people, they put the men from the South together and the men from the North together and put them on troop ships. So when they got to the United States, the train would move them and them and them. And it was very, very efficient. Bill was told to go on R&R in Florida, at which time he finished his GED. He then got a hold of the University of Alabama because he wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. Passed everything, worked hard, and his first job was actually for the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, NACA. There he was testing the speed of airplanes. They were using a wind tunnel. He was working and modifying airplanes. He worked on an X-1 and rebuilt it, and his modifications made it better. He worked on the X-2, the X-4, the X-5, and then he was getting bored. And so he wrote a letter to Huntsville, the 123 rocket scientists who were not captured, but they were down by Munich, and they were looking for Americans because they didn't want the Russians to capture them. It was Werner von Braun, Arthur Rudolph, Magnus von Braun, a lot of them, and they were building V1 and V2 rockets in Germany, and they brought them to the United States. Bill wrote them a letter. He was interviewed and hired on the spot, and he worked with Werner von Braun on the first missile, the Redstone missile. From there, he and Werner went to NASA. As a matter of fact, he was there the day on January 29th, 1969, when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. I don't know if you remember, but I always remember those big backpacks they had on their back. Remember those big white ones? They were their oxygenator. It was just crazy that those things were so big, but they needed them. As it was, one of the astronauts turned quickly and hit the toggle or hit the switch that turned on the Eagle lander and broke it off. NASA had a problem. The astronauts had a problem because how were they going to get them home? They took stock of the astronauts before they left for their moonwalk. And when they came back, they thought they had a solution. They had to see what the astronauts, of course, had in their pockets. And someone said to me, well, one of those guys must have been a Boy Scout because he was prepared. He had a ballpoint pen with him. And that ballpoint pen was made of metal because at that time, there were no plastic Bic pens. I think I remember those as being the first. So they took that ballpoint pen, they opened it up, they took out the inside, put it back together, pushed very hard on that starter. And I guess you could say the rest is history. But what really amazes me, it was a little ballpoint pen that saved two men's life and possibly saved, what would have happened had those men died? What would be different about our world? What would it have been like? Would the Russians have continued? Would our space exploration died? Would we be in a completely different world right now? Possibly, I don't know. I try and think about it, and I hope maybe you guys will think about it a little bit because it's really such an incredible situation that they found themselves in. That day, failure was not an option for any of them, for Werner von Braun, for Bill Grafton, for any of the other engineers. They had to solve that. I looked up who came up with that saying, failure is not an option. And unfortunately, it was with Apollo 13. But then I thought, well, I could finish this presentation with a little story about Apollo 13, because Bill Grafton just happened to be there for that one too. He said when those astronauts were out of oxygen, remember Tom Hanks was in it and they were trying to get him oxygen and they were going to suffocate and they didn't know what they would do. Bill Grafton and those men figured out how to make the air pure so that those men would survive. He told me, when I watch that movie, I sweat. I can't stand to watch it. It just brings it all back to me. And I'm so stressed out. I really, honestly I can't watch it. There's another instance where failure was not an option. I would like to say to all of you, I don't really use that exact saying, but I like the idea of failure's not an option. It means I get up earlier in the morning. I start my day working quickly and efficiently. Everything I want to do with my speaking career, with the work I've done and put my heart into for the last 28 years, I want to share with the world. It's that important to me. I mean, heck, I spent a big chunk of my retirement because it was that important to me. I asked for you, that you too, whatever it is that you want to do, whatever it is that makes you alive, that brings you joy, or that just makes you work harder because it's good, I hope that you find failure is not an option for you as well. Master Toastmaster? Thank you.
Well, shared Wyoming are the next speaker visitors. So thank you for being here and thank you for that. Our teams. So I whispered to my wife here after your story that I guess there is truth to that old saying, a pen is mightier than the sword, right?
Right.
Okay. Our next speaker is a qualified speaker, past district governor, District 12. And I heard him speak just yesterday. Now, I can imagine I would have heard him speak many occasions. And he spoke to the Kiwanis Club, and I have to say, in front of this audience, that I think it was the best speech I ever heard. And he's giving us a different speech tonight. So talk about a talent. Let me read his introduction. Jeremiah Lau has been a Toastmaster for 14 years, having served the organization in many ways. He is proud of the journey he has made in Toastmasters and the lessons it has taught. Given everything Toastmasters has done, Jeremiah will be sharing the first big decisions he made that set him on a path of learning and dedication and friendship and a lot of bumps and bruises. His journey started in the 8th grade and now with those past experiences will leave you remembering times of years ago and hopefully with as much joy as it is left on the story. Jeremiah. Jeremiah?
Did everybody hear me okay online? Okay. Close your eyes with me for a second. And I want you to think. I want you to think about that decision that you made. Remember that decision that you didn't know was big at that time, but you made it. And then life took steps. Where are you right now, Suzanne? Where is that?
Where's that place?
Where is that place? Ministerial school, fantastic. David, where is that place? Without a home. Without a home. Our. Anybody else? Brian, where is it? There you go. Changing jobs. Somebody online. Where are you? What are you thinking about this? Mute yourself. Tell me.
I don't think they can hear you. Put the microphone on.
Somebody online. Tell me where you are.
Legally separated.
Legally separated. Well, let me tell you, fellow Toastmasters, guests, decision makers. I am an 8th grader. I am sitting on the gym floor. They're just introduced all of the coaches, all of the committees, all of the things that you could do in a school. You know, I'm at that big crucial part of my life. Girls just become cool, but I'm not quite for sure if it's cool just yet for me. But needless to say, I'm there. The football coach comes up and tells about football. And all the guys are like, sign us up. But my mother wouldn't let me sign up for football that year. The kid across the street from us broke his kneecap his senior year. So football, out of the question. But then the athletic director comes up and he starts talking about wrestling. Wrestling? I love Hulk Hogan. Macho Man Randy Savage, the ultimate warrior, running down the aisle, jumping in the ring, kicking on the ropes. Jimmy Snuka, jumping from the top of the cage. Oh my God, I was in love. Forget women, I wanted to wrestle. So I put my name down for wrestling that day. And I went about my day. Didn't think anything about it. I got a call randomly that summer. And it was from somebody by the name of Cedric Story. He was the high school wrestling coach. And he said, you showed some interest, I'd like to invite you to practice. All right. So I went to my first practice. Now I have to explain to you who Cedric is. Cedric was only about 5 foot tall. He was also about 5 foot wide. He was a bouncer on the side for Death Row Records. He could put 400 up like he was just lifting curls. He was a school security guard, a Marine Corps drill sergeant, but one of the most amazing men you would ever meet. Went to practice that day, and we got ready to run. So Cedric sent us on a run. Just a quick 3 miles, just to keep going. Then we would go run bleachers. Then we'd run wind sprints. We never stepped on a mat. This was not the wrestling I signed. But I came back the second day, the third day, and I spent the next 4 years of my life wrestling in high school. It was an amazing experience. Every time it gets cold, my right elbow hurts a little bit because of those days in high school. I would come home with bruises, fractures, bloody noses. I wouldn't be able to eat during Thanksgiving over the 4 years, and I would have to stand on the scale with my dinner plate, trying to make sure I could make weight because the Colton Christmas Classic was coming up that weekend, and I better make weight or my coach is going to be pissed. I did all of that for 4 years, but I loved every minute of it for those 4 years. I thrived. I was a 4-year varsity letterman, but more importantly, I was able to meet some amazing people. The people that I made friends with changed who I am. They're high school kids. They're trying to figure out their lives, but they helped modify mine. So I'd like to share with you a story about these four people, these people. We're gonna go. Clearly, I need Roger to help me out with technology on this thing. What you're gonna see here, in case you're wondering, the stunning looking young man with brown hair on the right, that's me. That was before I found out what Mexican food was in Miguel's Jr., just so you know. Well, let me introduce you to the two ladies in the front. The one on the left is Krista. Krista was a pastor's daughter. Devotion to her beliefs more than you can believe. While most of us were out drinking aftershock or Mickey's or whatever we could get at the local liquor store or having a dip, she was attending church, always inviting us. The one next to her was Breezy. Breezy was my staff. Every time I wrestled, Breezy was there. Breezy was infectious. She would smile. She was always pleasant. And you could always know that somebody was going to be happy whenever Breezy was around, because she was an uplifter. The gentleman to the left, on the top row, that's Geraldo. I went to junior high with Geraldo. Actually, Geraldo was the first person that ever beat me up too in junior high, in case you're wondering. But Geraldo was a friend tried and true. If there was something happening in high school, Geraldo was the first person next to me. Somebody wanted to fight, I knew Geraldo would be right there backing me. No matter what, he was there. Next to him is Ian. Ian was the cool one. Ian was the one that a lot of us wanted to hang out with. You wanted to be seeing Ian. Ian was the one that elevated your status, but also brought people along. He took people along his journey, and he made sure that everybody was taken care of. And if we go over to the other picture, the gentleman in the back row on the left is Richard. Richard, in our group, was the one that could fit in everywhere. He was a natural athlete. This guy walked into the mat room and owned people without any lessons. But not only that, but Richard could walk into a room and connect with everybody in a way you could not imagine. He was a friend to everybody. Never really met anybody that had anything to say about Richard that would be bad. So all of these people taught me lessons. Slowly but surely. Geraldo always being there. Ian was the first person I actually got a chance to on a Saturday night to hang out with outside of my family and go hang out with buddies on a weekend. These were experiences we had. We spent, some of us 4 years, some 3 years, some 2 years together. We took these pictures to remember them. We shared stories. We shared life together. We had successes in the mat and rings. We had failures in life. But every single one of them were there all the way through. No questions asked, no judgments. They were there. And I didn't realize until recently how much they affected me. And the reason why I didn't was because life got in the way, as we all do. We graduated high school. I went to college. Some of them went their own ways. we went in different directions. Life got in the way. We got families, we got jobs. We kind of grew apart. But we would still connect on Facebook, we would tell stories, maybe shoot a message back and forth. But then something happened this past year. My nephew started high school. That's my nephew. Right there on the left, he's pinning a young man in his first varsity, in his first freshman tournament. He's the left one to the left, me, along with his friend, right there. And I remember walking into that room as he's getting ready to wrestle for his duel. And for anybody, has anybody here ever wrestled? Ever wrestled in high school? There's a smell whenever you walk into a mat room of sweat. And I don't know how to be able to explain it, but you recognize it whenever you've been there. And I felt that. I smelled that. I sat in the bleachers watching my nephew wrestle. Watching his teammates cheer. Then bond. Then build each other up. Then talk about wrestling. The connections that they made. I'm watching him do this. And it took me back to high school. And it reminded me of everything that those kids at that time did for me. Because he's living the same story I had the opportunity to, but in his own path, with his own friends, his own successes. And I had a chance to go watch this. Over the course of the past 20 years, things have changed some. Clearly, you can tell I found food. And I don't have to weigh my food anymore. But on the left is a picture whenever Krista came out and before we're all moved to Texas. On the right is a picture we took just about a year ago. It's actually an exact replica of the picture that me, Richard, and Ian took in high school. Richard came from back east to be able to come visit with us. You see, Geraldo lives in Texas now. He's a family man, has a beautiful family, a beautiful wife and kids. And he's grown into be an amazing person that I'm glad to call my friend. Krista still has a devotion like you would not believe. And every time you struggle on something, that's the first thing she goes to is her beliefs. And that dedication and focus is amazing. Richard is serving our country right now. He is, and in a second we have a couple minutes, I can have him introduce himself. But Richard is serving our company. He is actually an officer. He is back east right now in Virginia, I believe. Ian still is one of the coolest guys I know. Just came back from Miami. Has a beautiful, I guess I should say Krista has a lovely husband and beautiful kids. Richard, lovely wife, beautiful kid. Ian, beautiful kid, lovely fiance I got a chance to be able to meet. But Ian still travels around, is still the guy when you talk to him, it's the stories he has and the things he does, still just connects. And Breezy, who I'll be seeing here very soon. Beautiful family, lovely husband, still, I talked to him recently on the phone and we connected and I automatically felt better talking to him. But you see, not only are they who they are who I am. Part of me is Breezy because I want to be the person whenever we're talking, I'm finding out about people. I want them to feel better. I want to make that connection. I want them to be happy. Part of me is Richard. But I want to be able to walk into a room, connect with an audience, shake their hands, and be able to hear about their stories. Part of me is Krista. About believing in my beliefs. The same is true. No matter if everything else is telling you If everybody else is telling you no, stick to what you believe in. Part of it is Richard, or Waldo, about being a friend. Being somebody that you can count on. Whatever times are tough, on the first call you make. Because we'll bleed together, we'll laugh together, and we'll celebrate together. These connections have lasted through the years. And at this time, I think I have a couple of minutes. I actually want to introduce these people, as they're such an important portion of my life. And you'll see them online. You'll see we have Krista Herman here, Richard, who, as I said, is serving our country. I believe Ian is here, Breezy, and I'm not for sure if Geraldo made it. They can maybe have them take off. Oh, there they are. Yeah, we put things in the chat. That's what friends are. That's the connection that I had the opportunity to be able to make. So what connections and what changes happened from your decision? You see, a lot of times we forget about that decision because there's so many other things that happen in life. But that decision was the biggest decision I made. Probably the first decision I made in 8th grade. And I can look back on that now and tell you, after knowing these people, it was the best decision I made. Because I'm the luckiest person alive to be able to call my friends and be able to spend those years together. You have that decision. And there's somebody you can talk to, connect with them, share that. Because that will absolutely be able to help you understand what it was. And it will help them understand. Share with them. Celebrate with them. And appreciate it. Mr. Toastmaster.
Amazing job. I can't imagine being able to put together 20-minute speeches in 48 hours. That's just that job, Jeremiah. Did you drop the numbers on so we can hand out our door prize? Bring me 5 numbers, and we do have a couple more minutes. If anyone has anything they need to share, we have a few of our QSs in the audience. I just wanted to say, if counting those numbers, we're close to between Zoom meeting and in person, approaching 40. We need to go. My private definition of success is 50. So let's keep working on it, making sure everybody gets out. Finding that they give me 5 numbers, so that we can send you on your way out 2 minutes early. Race, you gotta, whoever gets up here first 5 people, it's your choice of what's yours. I will read them in order, and I will read them twice. We'll start with, won't need to read all the numbers, just the last 3. Or less, yeah, last 3, I guess. And here the numbers are 908, 909, 913, 914, and 916. 908, 909, 913, 914, and 916. Come on down. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for your safety. Oh, don't worry about it, I trust you. We have 2 to go. We're 9:08, 9:09. Yeah, I think that was one. Take a choice. Okay, with that, thank the district for their support. Thank you, the VA hospital, for allowing us to be here. Rob, for our wonderful technology. Marilyn, for being excited. And Sharon, thank you for putting up publicity. We continue that every Wednesday in May.
All right, keep coming out, see.